Did you know some Native American tribes believed that dreams were more real than waking life? Or that the Mandan people performed elaborate underwater breath-holding rituals during puberty rites? Or that the Choctaw once used hollowed-out logs as telephones to communicate across long distances? These might sound like tales out of a fantasy novel, but they were part of everyday life in Native American cultures, long before the arrival of European settlers. What might seem strange to modern eyes was often deeply symbolic, practical, or spiritual in context. The world of pre-colonial Native America was incredibly diverse and nuanced, filled with an astonishing array of customs, languages, and philosophies that defy the simplistic images often portrayed in mainstream media. Contrary to the outdated stereotype of a singular Indian identity, there were over 500 distinct tribal nations, each with its own governance, belief systems, and cultural expressions. From the Inuit people of the Arctic Circle to the Calusa of southern Florida, and from the cliff-dwelling ancestral Puebloans to the vast nomadic tribes of the Great Plains, Native American life was far from monolithic. It was, in fact, an intricate mosaic of human experience. In the forests of the Northeast, for example, the Iroquois Confederacy, or Haudenosaunee, had a sophisticated form of democratic government that many scholars believe influenced the development of the United States Constitution. Their League of Five Nations was based on mutual respect, consensus building, and the idea that leadership should serve the welfare of the next 7 generations. Meanwhile, in the deserts of the Southwest, the Hopi built complex terraced villages made of adobe and stone, where spiritual rituals governed the calendar, and corn was not just a food, but a sacred element of life. Native cultures were not just societies. They were civilizations deeply integrated with the rhythms of the natural world. Language played an extraordinary role in shaping these cultures. Some tribes, such as the Tlingit or Navajo, developed incredibly complex linguistic systems, often filled with sounds that have no direct equivalent in English. These languages were rich in metaphor and often changed depending on who was being spoken to. Different words for elders, children, or animals, emphasizing respect and relationship in communication. The Cherokee even created a writing system, or syllabary, developed by Sequoyah in the early 19th century, allowing them to publish newspapers, books, and legal documents in their own tongue. A stunning testament to cultural adaptability and intellectual innovation. Beyond politics and language, Native Americans held a view of the universe that wove the physical and spiritual into one fabric. Everything had spirit: the rivers, the mountains, the trees, even the stones. To walk through the woods or cross a stream was to interact with a living world where every step had meaning and consequence. This reverence was not abstract. It was part of daily life, guiding the building of homes, the timing of harvests, and the songs sung at birth and death. It also shaped relationships within communities, emphasizing harmony, balance, and reciprocity. For many tribes, time itself was cyclical, not linear. Life followed the rhythms of the earth and sky, seasons turning like the spokes of a wheel. Even leisure and art were infused with meaning. The Lakota made intricate quill work long before Europeans introduced glass beads. The Haida carved massive totem poles, not as idols, but as family histories told in wood. Games such as lacrosse, originally known as stickball, were not merely recreational, but often spiritual, played to settle disputes or prepare for war. music was less about performance and more about invocation, with flutes, drums, and rattles calling down spirits or telling stories too sacred for ordinary words. What might strike a modern viewer as strange or exotic was, for Native Americans, simply the way things were. Logical, coherent, and rooted in centuries of accumulated wisdom. There was no need to divide life into compartments of sacred and profane, of work and rest, of human and non-human. Everything was connected. Everything mattered. This holistic worldview allowed for deep ecological knowledge. Plants were not only food or medicine, but teachers. Animals were kin and guides. Long before the term sustainability entered Western discourse, Native peoples had perfected the art of living with the land, not against it. As we drift into this first chapter of our journey, let us remember that the so-called primitive lives led by Native Americans were often more complex, compassionate, and ecologically attuned than anything we see in modern times. These were not lost people. They were living libraries of wisdom, thriving in tune with a world that today feels distant, almost mythical. In their quiet ceremonies and communal fires, in their woven baskets and painted hides, in their dreams and dances, we glimpse a way of life where human beings were part of a great, humming universe of spirit and soil, not separate from it. And perhaps, as we rest and listen, we too can hear the echo of those distant drums, steady, patient, and full of life. Some Native American tribes had no word for war in their language. Others had no concept of ownership as we understand it. Land wasn't something you could possess, but something you were a part of, like a limb to a body. In some societies, a person could not introduce themselves by name. Only others could speak your name out of respect. And in certain tribes, laughter during funerals wasn't seen as disrespect. It was believed to help guide the spirit safely into the next world. These customs, which may seem curious or contradictory to modern norms, speak volumes about the inner workings of traditional Native American societies, where individuality was always balanced by collective responsibility, and where social structures, while diverse, shared common threads of cooperation, harmony, and balance with nature and community. Life in these societies revolved around relationships, not just between people, but between all living things. The tribe was more than a group. It was a living, breathing network of families, elders, children, ancestors, and the unseen spirits that walked alongside them. Social roles were clearly defined yet fluid, often guided by age, wisdom, gender, and sometimes dreams or visions. In many cultures, leadership was not determined by wealth or conquest, but by merit, humility, and service to the people. The chief or council leader was often chosen for qualities such as fairness, generosity, and calm deliberation, not loud power or authority. Decisions were made through council meetings that could last days, where every voice was heard, even the quietest, especially the quietest. Women in many tribes held immense power. The Iroquois women could choose and remove chiefs. Among the Hopi, clan lineage was matrilineal, and in numerous cultures, women were seen as the spiritual backbone of society. Children were raised not just by parents, but by the entire community. This practice, often called alloparenting today, ensured that every child felt supported, and every adult held a stake in the tribe's future. Lessons weren't often taught through lectures or punishment, but through storytelling, observation, and gentle correction. Young ones learned by watching elders tan hides, gather herbs, or prepare food, and they learned values, patience, generosity, courage, not through force, but by example. Punishment was rare and often came in the form of quiet disapproval or a talk from an elder. The goal wasn't fear, but understanding. Marriage customs, too, varied widely. Some tribes practiced monogamy, while others allowed polygamy depending on the needs of the community. A man might marry multiple sisters to ensure harmony in the home. In other cases, women had the freedom to initiate divorce simply by placing their husband's belongings outside the lodge. These customs reflected practical wisdom. Marriage wasn't about control, but about balance. And always, whether in intimate partnerships or extended kinship, emotional and spiritual health was intertwined with social cohesion. No one was left entirely alone. The elderly were revered, not hidden. People who today might be labeled disabled or different were often considered spiritually gifted. Houses were also reflections of these values. The Plains tribes built teepees that could be set up and broken down in less than an hour, perfect for a nomadic life that followed the bison. In the Pacific Northwest, large cedar plank houses housed extended families under one roof, their walls etched with family stories in totemic form. Pueblo peoples built multi-storied stone and adobe villages with shared courtyards that encouraged daily cooperation and community. The architecture wasn't just shelter, it was storytelling, practicality, and identity all at once. Food gathering and preparation were communal as well. There were hunting parties, fishing expeditions, and seasonal foraging. Buffalo hunts were cooperative masterpieces, requiring strategy, trust, and precise timing. Corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters, were planted together because they supported one another's growth, both physically and symbolically. Meals weren't just about sustenance, they were ceremonies of gratitude. Even after the hardest winters, the first successful hunt of spring would be shared with the entire tribe, no matter how lean the year had been. Generosity was a core virtue. To give was to gain. Clans and kinship groups shaped identity and belonging. You weren't just an individual. You were your ancestors, your name, your animal spirit, your clan lineage. Many tribes had ceremonial societies or secret brotherhoods that governed spiritual knowledge or seasonal rituals. Others had warriors' councils, healers' circles, or ceremonial clowns. Yes, clowns, whose sacred role was to mock, challenge, and correct tribal behavior through humor. Every person had a place. Even those who didn't fit had their own path, often as shamans, dreamers, or songkeepers. And through it all, time moved gently. There were no alarm clocks, no commutes, no bureaucracies. Life followed the sun, the wind, the migrations, and the bloom. There was an elegance in the rhythm, a quiet, steady beat of waking with the dawn, working with hands, eating with gratitude, and sleeping beneath skies filled with stars. In traditional native societies, life was not a race but a circle, ever turning, always sacred. As you rest and listen, imagine the warmth of a fire in the center of a communal lodge, the soft hush of woven mats, the low murmur of elders telling old stories. In this world, the air is thick with cedar and smoke. The nights echo with owl calls and dream chants. And the idea of being alone, truly alone, does not exist. In this world, the tribe is everything. and the heart beats not for one, but for all. Among the Zuni people, it was believed that certain twins were born with the power to speak to rain spirits. The Navajo would perform complex sand paintings, detailed, symbolic art created from crushed stone and pollen, only to brush them away at the end of a ceremony, emphasizing the impermanence of life and the flow of healing. Some tribes conducted vision quests, where young individuals would fast alone in the wilderness for days, hoping to receive spiritual guidance through dreams or animal encounters. And for the Inuit, the aurora borealis was not just a natural wonder. It was said to be the dancing souls of the departed. These deeply spiritual practices may sound mysterious or strange to modern ears, but they were integral to Native American life, shaping how people saw the world, their role in it, and what waited beyond it. To most Native American tribes, the spiritual world was not a separate place. It was all around them, woven into every breath of wind, every rustling tree, every animal's glance. There was no sharp line between the material and the mystical. Everything had spirit. Stones had memory. Rivers had songs. Animals were not just game or companions. They were relatives, messengers, and sometimes teachers in disguise. This animistic worldview infused even the simplest acts: planting corn, lighting a fire, walking a trail, with a sense of reverence and attention. Life was ceremony, and every day was sacred. One of the central themes across many Native traditions was balance between earth and sky, male and female, light and dark, giving and receiving. This balance was often represented through the four directions: north, south, east, and west, each associated with specific colors, animals, seasons, and elements. These directions were not just geographical. They symbolized stages of life, states of being, and principles to live by. When ceremonies began, people would often turn to face each direction in turn, honoring the fullness of creation and the interconnectedness of all things. The circle, too, was sacred. It represented life's endless cycle: birth, death, rebirth, and the unity of all existence. Ceremonies were the living language of the spirit world. They were not mere rituals to be performed, but acts of communion with the unseen. Some ceremonies were private, deeply personal journeys of healing or transformation. Others were vast communal celebrations: sun dances on the plains, green corn festivals in the southeast, potlatches in the Pacific Northwest. These events could last days and were often filled with song, drumming, dancing, fasting, and storytelling. But always, they were grounded in purpose: to honor the ancestors, to heal the sick, to bring rain, to prepare for the hunt, to cleanse the soul. No action was done carelessly. Everything had meaning, rhythm, and order. The spiritual leaders of the tribes, often called medicine people, shamans, or holy ones, were not priests in the Western sense. They were healers, guides, interpreters of dreams, and keepers of ancient knowledge. These individuals might spend years in training, learning the properties of plants, the meanings of visions, the placement of ceremonial objects. They were both doctors and philosophers, often chosen by unusual birth signs, recurring dreams, or near-death experiences. Their tools were as diverse as their duties: feathers, stones, drums, sweetgrass, tobacco, bones, and sacred songs, passed down for generations. Dreams held a central role in spiritual life. Many believed that dreams were messages from the spirit world, or ancestors trying to communicate. Some tribes taught children from a young age to pay close attention to their dreams and even shared them around morning fires, interpreting symbols and seeking guidance. Vision quests, often undertaken during adolescence or at turning points in life, were extended dream journeys performed in solitude. Alone in the wilderness with no food and only water, the seeker would wait for a vision, perhaps a bear, a bird, a thunderstorm, that would become their lifelong guardian spirit or reveal their soul's purpose. Death, too, was not feared in the same way it is often feared today. Many Native Americans saw it as a transition rather than an end, a return to the spirit world where ancestors waited with open arms. Burial practices varied, but they often included offerings such as food, tools, and sacred items to accompany the soul on its journey. Among some plains tribes, sky burials placed the deceased on elevated platforms to return them to the heavens. For others, death rituals were private and deeply symbolic, with days of prayer, silence, and purification. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about Native American spiritual life was its quiet humility. There was no need to build towering temples or enforce rigid doctrines. The temple was the mountain, the prayer book was the river, the sermon was the wind. Spirituality was not something to be scheduled, it was lived. It was in the planting of seeds with care, in the quiet gratitude before a meal, in the respectful silence after a hunt. There were no strangers, only relatives, human, animal, tree, and stone alike. As you rest tonight, imagine lying under a sky brimming with stars, the cool scent of sagebrush in the air, and the low thrum of a distant drum. A soft chant rises in the darkness, a prayer not in words, but in feeling, one of gratitude, of awe, of peaceful surrender to the great mystery. In this world, spirit is not something sought. It is already here. It has always been here. Some Native American hunters would apologize to the animal they had just killed, whispering a prayer of thanks or placing a pinch of tobacco on the ground in its honor. In the Great Basin, people used decoys made of reeds shaped like ducks to lure real ones within reach of nets. The Apache could follow a trail invisible to outsiders, reading bent blades of grass and a single broken twig like pages of a book. The Inupiat hunted whales using tools carved from walrus ivory and passed down through generations. And the Anishinaabe believed that every berry picked had a spirit, which is why the first harvest of the season was never eaten, but offered back to the earth. These practices weren't just clever. They reflected a deep, intimate relationship between humans and nature, where survival was based not on domination, but on respect and understanding. For most Native American tribes, life was sustained through a blend of hunting, gathering, fishing, and small-scale agriculture, shaped by the seasons and the land's offerings. This way of life was not only practical, it was sacred. The act of gathering berries, roots, and herbs was not simply food collection. It was a ritual of gratitude. Each plant had its time, its story, and its medicine. Elders would teach the young not just where to find wild onions or camas bulbs, but how to ask the plant's permission before harvesting, how to leave enough for the next season, and how to carry it home with care. Food was never just fuel, it was a living gift. Hunting required skill, patience, and often silence. On the Great Plains, bison were the center of life for many tribes. Entire communities would work together to conduct large-scale hunts, using tactics that required coordination, trust, and deep knowledge of the land and animal behavior. In some cases, bison would be driven into specially designed enclosures or over cliffs known as buffalo jumps. These hunts provided not only meat, but hides for clothing and shelter, bones for tools, sinew for thread, and even dung for fuel. Nothing was wasted. The animal had given its life, and it was honored in full. In the eastern woodlands, deer, turkey, and small game were hunted using bows crafted from ash or hickory. Hunters often painted their faces, not just for camouflage, but a spiritual preparation, reminding themselves that the hunt was not conquest, but ceremony. Some believed that the spirit of the deer would only show itself to those who moved with humility and purpose. Even the act of tracking was seen as a kind of dialogue with the land, a question asked with every step, an answer read in each footprint or disturbed leaf. Fishing was vital for many coastal and river-based communities. The peoples of the Pacific Northwest developed complex systems of weirs, traps, and nets to catch salmon during their annual runs. Ceremonies were held to welcome the first salmon each year. Its bones returned to the water so it could speak well of the people and ensure the return of its kin. Farther inland, tribes like the Ojibwe used birch bark canoes and spearfishing techniques to glide silently through lakes. In the icy Arctic, the Inuit used harpoons and seal blubber lamps, their survival dependent on careful timing, shared knowledge, and generations of observation passed down in whispers and practice. Gathering wild plants was often the domain of women and elders, whose knowledge of the landscape was encyclopedic. They knew which mushrooms to avoid, which barks to steep for tea, and where to find the sweetest berries at just the right moment. They wove this knowledge into songs and stories, so that even the youngest children would remember which plants were good for stomach aches, which could dye clothing, or which should never be touched. A single root might be harvested only once a year. A patch of wild rice might be canoed across quietly, tapping the stalks gently with wooden sticks so the grains fell into the boat without damaging the plant. Seasons shaped everything. Spring brought new greens and nesting birds. Summer meant berries, fresh fish, and planting. Autumn was a time of gathering, preserving, and giving thanks. Winter was for storytelling, crafting tools, and reflecting on the year's lessons. Food was dried, smoked, or stored in underground caches. Meals were shared communally, and food distribution was based not on wealth, but on need. Elders and children ate first. Visitors were always fed, even in lean times. Generosity was a form of spiritual wealth. The relationship between people and the land was reciprocal. You took, but you also gave. You hunted, but you also sang. You gathered, but you also planted. In some tribes, it was said that humans were the youngest siblings in creation, and as such, they had the most to learn from their older brothers and sisters. The trees, the animals, the stars. Harmony wasn't an abstract idea. It was a daily practice embedded in how you cut a root, how you thanked a trout, or how you stored a winter squash. So as you listen, let your mind drift into that quiet world where feet tread softly on pine needles, where the rustle of leaves means something, where the air carries the scent of smoke and moss. Picture a woman bending gently to pick wild mint from a streamside. Imagine a young man crouched in the tall grass, waiting for the wind to shift. Hear the low calls of geese above, the ripple of fish beneath a birch bark canoe, the soft crunch of snow under a fur-wrapped boot. In this world, food is not just nourishment. It is story, ceremony, and survival. And every meal begins with gratitude. Some Native American artists painted with crushed beetles, burned bones, or flower pollen. Others carved stories into walrus tusks or wove entire myths into a single basket. In certain tribes, babies were wrapped in elaborately beaded cradle boards, tiny masterpieces made not just for beauty, but as protective spiritual armor. Among the Pueblo, entire murals were painted in sacred rooms with natural dyes that faded like dreams over generations. And in the Arctic, the Inuits sewed waterproof parkas from the intestines of seals, using threads made from sinew and bone needles finer than any metal. Art in Native American cultures was never just decoration. It was a sacred language, one that spoke in colors, patterns, textures, and silence. In traditional Native life, art was everywhere, woven into the very rhythm of living. It wasn't something separated into galleries or special occasions. It lived on clothing, tools, pottery, homes, and even in the way footsteps pressed into the snow. Each design carried meaning. A zigzag might represent lightning, a spiral, the journey of life. A row of triangles could tell of mountains crossed, enemies defeated, or ancestors honored. Unlike modern art, which often celebrates the artist as an individual, Native American art reflected community, heritage, and continuity. You didn't create just for yourself. You created as a link in a much longer chain. Beadwork, for example, became one of the most iconic forms of Native craftsmanship, especially after the arrival of European glass beads. Yet long before that, tribes used porcupine quills, dyed with plant pigments, softened with saliva, and stitched into buckskin with painstaking precision. A single pair of moccasins could take weeks to make, every bead a prayer, every stitch a memory. Quill work required not just patience, but deep knowledge of color, symmetry, and symbolic language. The Lakota might bead a rosette with 4 points for the cardinal directions. The Cree might use blue to represent the sky spirits. And no two pieces were ever quite alike. Each one carried the story of the maker's hand. Pottery was another ancient art, especially in the Southwest. Pueblo women passed down the secrets of clay through generations, from the way it was dug and cleaned to how it was coiled, shaped, and fired. These pots were not spun on wheels, but formed by hand, slowly, lovingly. Their surfaces bore painted designs, birds in flight, rain clouds, feathers, and stepped pyramids. Many of the symbols echoed prayers for water, for crops, for harmony. Firing a pot was like conducting a ceremony. The flames, the wind, the moisture in the air, all had to align just right. A crack could be a lesson in humility. A perfect pot, a quiet miracle. Textiles and weaving told stories too. The Navajo developed some of the most celebrated techniques in the world, their rugs and blankets featuring intricate geometric patterns in earthy reds, blacks, and creams. Each loom was a sacred space, and the weaver a kind of spiritual practitioner. It was said that a true Navajo weaver would always leave a small spirit line, a break in the pattern, through which the soul of the artist could escape, preventing pride from taking root. Weaving wasn't just an art form, it was a meditation, a legacy, and a form of living prayer. Even the materials used had their own souls. Birch bark was more than just wood. It was a storyteller. When sewn into boxes or canoes by the Anishinaabe, it carried memory, lightness, and grace. Shells, feathers, and stones were not random adornments, but chosen with care. A feather could represent bravery or a powerful dream. A piece of turquoise, protection. A carved bear tooth might signal strength in battle. Nothing was used without meaning, and nothing was taken without giving thanks. Paintings were created not just on hides or walls, but on bodies. Face paint before a hunt or battle carried deep meaning. Red might represent war or protection, black the unknown or spiritual strength. And in some tribes, face paint was worn only during sacred ceremonies, never casually. It transformed the wearer, preparing them to speak with the spirits or walk among ancestors. And always, the process was as important as the product. You didn't rush a basket or a carving. You worked in rhythm with the seasons, the sun, the heartbeat of the land. Songs were sometimes sung during creation, low chants to guide the hands and invite good energy. In this way, even a simple object, a spoon, a drum, a belt, became more than it seemed. It became a container of memory, a map of the people, a gift to the future. So now, as your breath slows and your body sinks into rest, imagine sitting by the side of an elder, her hands stained with clay, her fingers worn but graceful. The fire crackles gently. She hums as she shapes a pot, and every motion is calm, intentional, sacred. Or picture a father bending over a pair of moccasins, each bead a small star in a night sky of leather. In this quiet world, art is not a luxury. It is life, carried in the fingertips, passed down in silence, glowing in the folds of every hand-woven blanket. And here, everything you touch has a story. Among the Iroquois, it was believed that each drumbeat called the heartbeat of Mother Earth. The Hopi used flutes carved from river cane to summon rain spirits with long whistling notes meant to mimic the wind. Inuit throat singers performed hypnotic duets using breath and voice in a game of echo and endurance, creating sounds that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. Some plains tribes sang lullabies, not to children, but to horses, tunes meant to bond rider and steed. And in the Southwest, certain songs could only be sung at sunrise or during the waxing moon, because they were believed to carry different powers depending on the hour. Native American music was more than melody. It was medicine. It was memory. It was sacred space carried on the wind. Every tribe had its own musical tradition, its own rhythms and tones, shaped by geography, language, and belief. But music was universal, woven into daily life, ceremony, healing, hunting, and celebration. There were songs to greet the morning, songs to mourn the dead, songs to bring animals near, and songs to ease childbirth. Singing wasn't about performance. It was about participation. It was a way to connect to others, to the land, and to the world unseen. Often, music was not written down or recorded. It was passed from ear to ear, from heart to hand, carried in the breath of grandmothers and the voices of young warriors returning home. The instruments themselves were gifts of the natural world. Drums were the most common, made from stretched animal hides over wooden frames. Some were handheld, played gently with a single stick. Others were large and round, placed in the center of a circle, surrounded by singers. Each beat was a prayer. Flutes, often made from cedar or bone, had soft, airy tones, perfect for courting songs or lonely evening serenades. Rattles were filled with seeds, stones, or shells, and were used to keep rhythm, to invoke spirits, or to awaken certain energies during healing rituals. The clack of deer hooves tied to a dancer's ankles, the rustle of feathered fans. These, too, were music. the whole body could become an instrument. And then there was the voice, pure, emotional, unfiltered. Native singing often involved repeating lines or syllables, moving between high-pitched calls and lower chants. In some songs, the words didn't carry literal meaning, but rather conveyed feeling, rhythm, or spiritual intention. These were vocables, syllables like heya, yo, or ai, which held power even without translation. Singing was not bound by Western ideas of harmony or scale. It was raw, expressive, elemental. It echoed across plains, whispered through forests, and reverberated in the stillness of desert nights. But perhaps even more powerful than song was the art of storytelling. Every tribe had storytellers, keepers of myths, legends, histories, and moral lessons. These were not just entertainers, but teachers, philosophers, and cultural memory bearers. They remembered the long journeys, the great hunts, the mistakes of ancestors, and the creation of stars. Their stories explained why the bear limps, why the moon follows the sun, why the coyote laughs. Some stories were playful, meant for children before bed. Others were serious, told only in winter when the snakes and spirits slept beneath the ground. And others still were never told aloud, but passed in dreams. In some cultures, stories could not be shared unless permission was given, because they belonged to families, clans, or specific seasons. Some were tied to ceremonial roles, where the telling itself was part of a ritual. Storytellers often spoke with deep rhythm and pause, using their hands, their faces, the firelight dancing across their skin to pull listeners in. A simple tale of a bird or tree could unfold into layers of meaning, about generosity, humility, love, and loss. Storytelling was also a survival tool. Long before written language, oral traditions preserved everything a tribe needed to remember: how to make shelter, where to find water, how to treat illness, how to behave with honor. These lessons were wrapped in metaphor, so they could reach children's hearts before their minds were ready. A tale of a boy who disobeys the river spirits might seem like a fantasy, but underneath, it was a warning. Respect the water, or suffer the consequences. And within these stories, everyone had a place. Animals were never just animals. They were teachers. The fox, clever and sly. The bear, strong and moody. The eagle, noble and far-seeing. Even tricksters like raven or coyote served a purpose, showing that life was full of surprises, that rules could be broken, that wisdom often came from foolishness. In this way, storytelling was not just about the past. It was about the now. It taught people how to live. So as your eyes grow heavy, imagine yourself around a fire, the stars overhead spinning slowly in silence. The air is cool. A story is being told, softly, slowly, one word at a time. A boy with a carved flute wanders into the mountains and meets a spirit in the shape of a hawk. A woman listens to the wind and hears the voice of her grandmother. A wolf teaches a hunter the rhythm of stillness. These tales drift like smoke into the night, curling through your dreams. And in the hush between words, you feel the song of the earth itself, humming gently beneath your bones. Some Native American homes were invisible from a distance, built into cliffs, hidden by brush, or sunk partially underground to blend with the earth. In the Arctic, the Inuit constructed igloos so expertly that they could support the weight of a man on the roof while remaining warm enough inside to sleep without shivering. In the Southwest, Pueblo people made multi-story dwellings from adobe and stone. accessible only by ladders that were pulled up at night for safety. The nomadic teepee of the plains could be taken down and packed in under an hour, yet withstood the roar of prairie storms. And the Iroquois longhouse, stretching over 100 feet in length, was home not to a single family, but to entire clans, living, laughing, and dreaming beneath one long, smoke-darkened roof. These weren't just buildings. They were living expressions of culture, climate, and community. Native American architecture was inseparable from nature. Homes weren't imposed on the land. They rose from it. Each structure was tailored to its environment, made with materials gathered by hand: cedar bark, river stones, prairie grasses, buffalo hides, adobe clay, birch bark, whale bones, or snow itself. And every design choice, each curve, each wall, each entrance, was intentional. Shelter was not just physical, it was spiritual. It was a way to live in harmony with the world, not in conquest of it. On the Great Plains, teepees, or teepees, offered the perfect balance of mobility and strength. Constructed from long poles tied at the top and covered with buffalo hides, they could be quickly assembled or disassembled to follow the herds. Their conical shape helped them resist wind, and a smoke hole at the top allowed for fires inside. Families arranged their possessions with care: beds of fur and woven mats, tools hanging from pegs, sacred bundles resting near the entrance. Women often owned and managed the tippies, decorating them with painted symbols: a lightning bolt for power, a moon for protection, a butterfly for transformation. At night, the thin walls glowed with firelight from within, flickering with movement and life. Farther east, in the woodlands of the Iroquois and Algonquin, long houses stretched like wooden ships anchored to the soil. Made from bent saplings and bark sheets, these elongated shelters could house 20 or more people. Each family had its own space along a central corridor, and a shared fire pit served as both hearth and heart. Smoke drifted through openings in the roof, and the scent of wood smoke clung to every beam. Children played in the shadows while elders told stories, and neighbors passed in and out like waves on the shore. To live in a longhouse was to live in deep community. No door was locked, and no one was ever truly alone. In the Southwest, Pueblo communities built villages of stone and adobe, sun-dried mud bricks that held heat in winter and stayed cool in summer. These homes rose in stacked terraces resembling ancient castles of clay. Ladders connected upper rooms, and walls were plastered smooth with clay, mixed by hand. Rooftop openings served as entryways, reached by climbing down into the home below, a practice that symbolized descending into the womb of Mother Earth. The Hopi believed their homes mirrored the spiritual world, and every act of building was a prayer. Even today, some Pueblo structures have stood for over 1,000 years, bearing silent witness to countless generations. In the forests of the Pacific Northwest, coastal tribes like the Haida and Tlingit built large plank houses from red cedar, trees so massive that a single trunk could span an entire wall. These homes were carved and painted with totemic symbols: bears, ravens, killer whales, each telling the story of the clan or family within. Inside, a fire pit smoked under the gaze of carved poles, while mats of cedar bark lined the floors. The scent of the sea mixed with the sweet smell of wood. These homes were not just places to sleep. They were ceremonial spaces, theaters, schools, and temples of memory. In Alaska and the far north, where the cold could kill in minutes, The Inuit built snow houses, igloos, shaped in perfect domes, using nothing but blocks of packed snow. Inside, the temperature might rise to a comfortable warmth, thanks to body heat and seal oil lamps. The walls sparkled with tiny ice crystals, and furs lined the sleeping platforms. These structures, ephemeral as clouds, were both engineering marvels and spiritual sanctuaries, shelters made of silence and sky. And across the deserts in the arid southwest, some tribes like the Hohokam built complex irrigation systems and walled compounds, their homes facing the sunrise to greet each day. Others carved their dwellings directly into cliffs, like the ancestral Puebloans at Mesa Verde, whose homes perch like swallows' nests in the stone. To climb into these spaces is to climb into the past, into shadow and sunlight, into the quiet hum of ancient life. Wherever you go across the continent, each home told a story, not just of who lived there, but of how they saw the world. A round structure might reflect the cycles of the seasons, a central hearth, the unity of the family. Openings aligned with solstices and stars reminded all who entered that their lives were part of something larger, an echo of the sky, a breath of the earth. So now, let yourself drift into that world. Feel the warmth of a fire flickering against the curve of a hide wall. Smell the cedar smoke curling into the rafters. Hear the quiet breathing of a sleeping village beneath stars. Whether you imagine a teepee in the grasslands, a stone home tucked into a cliff, or a plank house resting among tall pines, know that each of these spaces held more than people. They held spirit, memory, and the heartbeat of an entire way of life. Among the Plains tribes, warriors sometimes wore shirts adorned not just with beads or feathers, but with human hair, locks gifted by loved ones to commemorate acts of bravery. Among the Inuit, the most finely tailored parkas were made from the intestines of seals, stitched so tightly with sinew that they were both waterproof and windproof. In the Southwest, Pueblo women painted their faces and hair with sacred clay before dances, while in the Great Basin, rabbit skin robes were woven not from whole pelts, but from hundreds of narrow strips of fur, hand-twisted into warm, flexible blankets. Some tribes used skunk oil as a form of mosquito repellent, and in some ceremonies, individuals wore nothing at all, not from poverty, but from belief that spirit must meet spirit, unadorned. Across Native America, clothing was never merely fabric. It was identity, ceremony, and protection all at once. Each piece was shaped by climate, culture, belief, and community. And more than that, it was a living work of art, stitched by memory, dyed by story, and passed down through generations like a prayer made tangible. For many peoples, the material world came first from the animal world. Deer, elk, moose, bison, rabbit, seal, and caribou all provided not only food, but the raw materials for clothing. Every part of the animal was honored, used, and transformed with care. Hide was scraped with bone or stone tools, stretched and softened with fat, smoke cured for color and durability. This was not a quick process. It could take days or weeks to prepare a single piece of buckskin, suitable for making a tunic or leggings. Yet, in this labor, there was love. There was gratitude. There was connection to the life that had been given, and the life that would be protected in return. In the forests of the Northeast, Iroquois and Algonquian peoples often wore clothing made from tanned deerskin. Tunics, breechcloths, leggings, and moccasins were common, stitched together with sinew and embroidered with dyed porcupine quills. Women wore wraparound skirts or dresses, often belted with sashes made from plant fibers or braided hair. And when the winter snow deepened, robes of fur, fox, bear, raccoon, were wrapped tight and lined with soft skins. Clothing was functional, yes, but also sacred. A quill-embroidered sash might tell the story of a marriage. A painted tunic might display symbols of a dream or vision. Even the colors used in dyes, red from sumac, black from charred roots, yellow from ochre, carried meaning. Nothing was random. Everything was chosen. On the windswept plains, where the buffalo roamed in vast herds, the hide of that great animal became the heart of life itself. Bison hides were used to make everything, from teepees to shields, from cradles to ceremonial robes. Clothing for both men and women was often crafted from soft tanned bison leather, decorated with beads, feathers, and bones. Warriors wore shirts painted with symbols of protection: eagles, suns, zigzag lightning. These shirts were sometimes fringed with locks of human hair or long strands of leather, which swayed like prayer flags as the wearer moved. Women's dresses were equally stunning, long, flowing, beaded and fringed. They might be adorned with elk teeth, each tooth a symbol of wealth and status, since only 2 could be harvested from each animal. A dress with hundreds of elk teeth was not only beautiful, it was a declaration of familial honor, patience, and care. In the cold northern forests and tundra, among tribes such as the Cree and Inuit, clothing was designed not only for beauty, but for survival. Parkas made from layered caribou or sealskin were sewn with such skill that they could retain body heat even in temperatures below freezing. Fur was worn inward to trap warmth, and snow goggles made from carved bone with narrow slits protected eyes from the glare. Mittens, boots, and hoods were lined with rabbit fur or layered moss, and soles were often doubled for extra insulation. Yet even here, where clothing was a literal barrier between life and death, adornment was not forgotten. Intricate beadwork decorated the collars and cuffs of parkas. Carvings were etched into ivory buttons. Fringe danced on the edges of snow-dusted sleeves. In every stitch, care. In every stitch, pride. The art of beadwork became especially widespread after the arrival of Europeans, who traded glass beads in bright blues, reds, whites, and greens. Native artists quickly adapted these new materials, developing stunning floral and geometric patterns. Entire garments, moccasins, vests, pipe bags, could be covered in tiny beads, each one sewn by hand, each design rooted in meaning. A pair of beaded moccasins might carry symbols of rivers, stars, birds, or kinship lines. And while today they sit behind glass in museums, once they danced through ceremonies, were gifted at weddings, or carried across battlefields and hunting trails. Adornment extended far beyond clothing. Hair, too, was sacred. On the plains, warriors often wore their hair in long braids or topknots, decorated with bone, shell, or feathers. In the Southwest, Hopi women shaped their hair into large side buns called squash blossoms to signal they were unmarried. In other tribes, hair was cut or unbound to mark mourning. A single feather tucked into a braid could signify a vision, a deed of valor, or a connection to a spirit animal. Each choice was personal, deliberate, and often ceremonial. And then there was the jewelry: necklaces of turquoise, shell, bone, and stone, earrings made from copper or silver, bracelets hammered from native metals or carved from antler. In some tribes, shells like wampum were used not just for decoration, but as a form of currency woven into belts that recorded treaties, stories, or events. The jewelry was not flashy in a modern sense, but full of power. A single pendant might carry the weight of generations. In every stitch, bead, braid, and feather, native clothing and adornment whispered stories. They spoke of the earth and sky, of spirits and dreams, of love, grief, honor, and belonging. They transformed the human body into a canvas of memory. As you settle deeper into stillness, imagine yourself in a world where every thread you wear is tied to your ancestors, every color chosen with care, every fold of cloth a prayer. The firelight flickers across the hem of a dress embroidered with stars. A soft breeze lifts a feather at the crown of a child's head. The night is quiet, and all around you, beauty rests not in gold or glitter, but in the living language of handmade things. Among some native tribes, a single outfit could hold the memory of a lifetime. A woman's wedding dress might be worn again only for her burial, linking the joy of her union to the sacredness of her return to the earth. In certain Pueblo traditions, infants were swaddled in robes made from old, ceremonial garments, so that the dreams and blessings of past generations might surround them as they slept. In other regions, a warrior's war shirt might carry embroidered marks of each battle survived, a visual journal written not with ink, but with bead, quill, and paint. Nothing was ever wasted. Nothing was meaningless. Even clothing that had grown too worn to wear might be folded and buried with reverence, like an old friend returning to the soil. Adornment, like life itself, moved in cycles. It marked transitions, childhood to adulthood, single to married, living to ancestor. For many native peoples, these rites of passage were not marked by grand speeches or gold rings, but by handmade items imbued with symbolism. A young boy might receive his first feather after a successful hunt, a symbol of growth and responsibility. A girl might be given a woven sash at her coming-of-age ceremony, its pattern echoing the flow of rivers or the phases of the moon. These garments and accessories weren't just worn, they were lived in, carried, honored. Even the ways clothing moved with the body had meaning. The long fringe on a woman's dress wasn't just decorative, it flowed and fluttered with the rhythm of her dance, extending her energy, echoing her motion. When a dancer spun, the fringe spun too, becoming an extension of the spirit. In some tribes, fringe was believed to confuse evil spirits, making it harder for them to cling to the person wearing it. On the plains, the jingle dress, now a famous fixture at powwows, originated as a healing dress. Each metal cone sewn along its hem would make a sound as the wearer moved, the tinkling said to call upon spirits of restoration and strength. And so, each movement became a prayer, each rustle of fabric, a heartbeat. Colors, too, were never chosen casually. Red might symbolize life, blood, and vitality. Blue, the sky or the spirit world. White, purity and mourning. Black could mean death, but also protection, mystery, and power. Yellow was the sun, warmth, and guidance. A dress dyed a particular shade might be worn only in certain seasons or by people with specific roles within the tribe. Some patterns could only be worn by medicine people, others by warriors or clan leaders. To wear the wrong design was not just a fashion error, it was a misunderstanding of sacred relationships. In the desert Southwest, the Hopi, Zuni, and Navajo peoples became renowned for their silver and turquoise jewelry, crafts that fused native techniques with materials introduced through trade. Turquoise, in particular, was revered. A sky stone, a water stone, a stone of protection and vision. It was believed to bring good fortune, to shield the body from harm, to carry prayers upward like clouds. Artisans would set turquoise into silver rings, squash blossom necklaces, earrings, and brooches, each design echoing the symmetry of the natural world: petals, waves, feathers, and stars. These pieces were more than decoration. They were anchors of tradition, small sacred objects worn close to the skin. Even the act of making clothing or adornment was ceremonial. In many tribes, sewing, beading, or weaving was done in silence or while singing softly, prayers stitched into every thread. Grandmothers taught granddaughters the rhythm of the needle, the meaning behind each color and symbol. A simple belt might take weeks to complete, but its value was far beyond material. It held the spirit of the maker, and when gifted, it was not simply handed over. It was offered with words, with blessings, with a sense that something sacred had been shared. And yet, native clothing was never frozen in time. It adapted, it changed. After contact with Europeans, many tribes incorporated new fabrics, dyes, and materials into their garments: cotton and wool, silk ribbons, calico prints, glass beads, metal ornaments. These all found new life in the hands of native artisans. But even as styles evolved, the heart of the work remained the same: to wear something made with purpose, with memory, and with meaning. Today, at modern powwows and ceremonies, you can still see this legacy alive. Dancers whirl in dazzling regalia, feather bustles, beaded yokes, fringed shawls. Each element has its own story. Nothing is random. Each stitch whispers a name, a prayer, a journey. These garments aren't costumes. They are continuations, living art, living memory, a testament to resilience, beauty, and identity. So as you rest your eyes, imagine the feel of soft buckskin warmed by the sun, the sound of beadwork gently clinking as someone walks through tall grass, the scent of leather, sweetgrass, and sage rising from ceremonial garments stored with care. A young woman sits by firelight, her hands moving in practiced rhythm over a piece of fabric. Each thread she weaves connects her to her ancestors and to those not yet born. In this quiet, in this labor of love, an entire world is stitched into being, and all around her, in homes across mountains, deserts, and prairies, others are doing the same, singing, sewing, remembering, adorning the body not to boast, but to belong, to the land, to each other, to something deeper and older than words. Sleep now in that memory. Let it wrap you like a robe of soft deerskin and carry you gently into dream. Some Native American tribes believed that dreams were more real than waking life, that the soul could leave the body during sleep and travel to distant places, speak to ancestors, or learn from animals. Others practiced ritual fasting, not only to purify the body, but to make the spirit light enough to soar into the sky and receive visions. In the plains, certain medicine men were said to be able to walk through fire without burning, or call lightning during storm dances. Among the Zuni, small carved stones called fetishes were believed to contain the spirit of the animal they depicted and could offer protection, guidance, or strength. And throughout the continent, the very air, rocks, rivers, and trees were not seen as passive scenery, but as breathing, watching, living beings. The world itself was alive. To live within Native American spirituality was to live in relationship, with the earth, with the sky, with the winds, animals, ancestors, and unseen powers that moved through every leaf and stream. Religion wasn't something kept apart for Sundays or temples. It was stitched into every action. The planting of corn, the lighting of a fire, the naming of a newborn child. Each moment held sacred potential. Every sunrise was a ceremony. There was no single Native American religion. Instead, there were thousands of beliefs, unique to each tribe, each nation, each band, shaped by geography, history, and experience. But they shared a common thread: reverence, a profound, enduring respect for the forces that gave life and guided it. The Creator, sometimes called the Great Spirit, sometimes simply the Mystery, was not a distant ruler, but a present energy. And the purpose of life was not conquest or accumulation, but balance, harmony, right relationship. In many tribes, the number 4 was sacred, symbolizing the 4 directions, 4 seasons, 4 stages of life, 4 sacred elements. Ceremonies often began by facing east, greeting the dawn, then south, for warmth and growth, then west, where the sun sets and spirits pass into the next world, and then north, the realm of wisdom and endurance. Sacred tobacco was offered as a gift before prayers. Smoke, rising upward, carried words into the unseen. Rituals varied from region to region, but many centered around the cycles of the earth: solstices and equinoxes, planting and harvest, birth and death. In the southwest, the Hopi celebrated the return of the rain-bringing Katsinas, spirit messengers who arrived each spring with blessing dances. Their masked dancers believed to become the spirits themselves. In the northern plains, the Lakota held the sun dance, one of the most intense and powerful ceremonies, involving days of fasting, drumming, and prayer beneath the summer sky. At its heart was a tree, the tree of life, around which dancers moved in a slow circle, offering their suffering to bring healing for all people. Ceremony was never for the individual alone. It was communal. Songs were shared. Feasts were prepared. Drums echoed like thunder across the hills. Children were included, and elders were honored. Even in mourning, rituals were a source of collective strength. Among the Diné, Navajo, death was not seen as an ending, but a transition. Sacred songs, sand paintings, and chants guided the spirit home. In the forests of the northwest coast, potlatch ceremonies combined spiritual, social, and economic life into one breathtaking event. Families gathered for days of storytelling, dance, and gift-giving. These were not modest exchanges. A single family might give away blankets, carved masks, canoes, and even entire homes. To give, in this context, was not to lose, but to rise. Generosity became a sacred act. Power was not hoarded, it was shared. Healing was another key thread of Native spirituality. Illness was often seen not just as physical, but as spiritual imbalance. A medicine person, who might be male or female, worked not with pills or potions, but with plants, songs, touch, smoke, dreams. Each tribe had its own medicines: sage, cedar, sweetgrass, tobacco, bare root, willow bark. These were gathered with care, often after prayer. A plant was never taken without an offering: some hair, a bit of food, or a whispered thank you. Healing was as much about the spirit as the body, and many illnesses were treated with stories, symbols, or ceremonial dance. Perhaps the most enduring form of ceremony was song. Songs were not entertainment. They were invocations, bridges between worlds. Some were passed down for hundreds of years, their words known only to a few. Others came in dreams, gifted by the spirit world. Songs were sung during births, dances, hunts, and battles. They welcomed the rain. They carried the dead. Each beat of the drum was said to echo the heartbeat of the earth herself. Imagine now, a night lit only by fire and stars. A circle of figures moves slowly around a sacred fire. Feathers catch the light. Smoke rises in a thin blue column toward the sky. Somewhere, a voice begins to sing, low, rhythmic, rising and falling like breath. The drum follows, steady and slow. Around you the land listens, the trees, the animals, the wind. This is not performance. This is prayer in motion. Let yourself rest in that sound. Feel the ground beneath you, solid, alive. Smell the smoke of sage and cedar. Listen for the stories carried on the breeze. In the world of the Native American spirit, there is no separation. No indoors or outdoors. No sacred and profane. There is only connection, only relationship, only the quiet breath of a world alive with meaning. And as your eyes begin to close and your breath slows, you might imagine that world embracing you too, not as a stranger, but as part of the great circle. Under the stars, beside the fire, within the song. In many Native American traditions, the land itself was a living sacred text, an open book of stories, lessons, and memories that required attentive reading. Mountains were the backs of great animals resting beneath the earth. Rivers were the veins of Mother Earth. And caves were the wombs of creation, dark and full of promise. This intimate relationship between people and place shaped not only their spiritual beliefs, but also their everyday lives. To walk on the land was to walk through history, to touch the very essence of the world's beginnings. One of the most beautiful expressions of this connection was the ritual of vision quests, a solitary journey of fasting, prayer, and meditation in remote places, often on mountaintops or secluded valleys. The seeker, usually a young person stepping into adulthood, would leave the village behind and spend days or even weeks alone. They would fast and endure the elements, opening their hearts to visions or messages from spirits, animals, or ancestors. The guidance received on a vision quest could shape the rest of a person's life, granting clarity of purpose, a guardian spirit, or a gift to be shared with the community. These journeys were perilous but sacred. They demanded courage, patience, and humility. Similarly, the sweat lodge ceremony, common among many plains and woodland tribes, offered a profound physical and spiritual cleansing. The lodge itself was a small, dome-shaped structure, often made of bent saplings covered with blankets or animal skins. Inside, heated stones were placed in a central pit and doused with water to create steam. Participants sat in the darkness, enduring intense heat, singing prayers, and sharing in communal healing. The sweat lodge was seen as a symbolic womb, where one could be reborn cleansed of worries, illnesses, and negative energies. The ceremony fostered deep connection, not only between people, but between the individual and the universe. These sacred practices were never static. They adapted with changing times and circumstances, yet their core purpose endured: to sustain balance between the human and the spiritual, the seen and unseen. Many tribes recognized the necessity of keeping these ceremonies private or secret, understanding that power resides in respect and careful stewardship. This is why, for centuries, much of this knowledge was passed quietly, through oral tradition, whispered teachings, and careful mentorship. Many native ceremonies also involved the natural world cycles, the phases of the moon, the rising of certain stars, the blooming of plants. For example, the green corn ceremony, practiced by southeastern tribes like the Cherokee and Creek, celebrated the first corn harvest. This event was both a thanksgiving and a renewal, a time to forgive past wrongs, cleanse the community, and start anew with fresh corn. The entire village would gather for days of feasting, dancing, and ritual cleansing. The ceremony reaffirmed bonds between people, the earth, and the spiritual realm. Animals, too, were central to spiritual life, not just as sources of food or clothing, but as messengers, teachers, and kin. Many tribes believed that every person had a spirit animal, a guide who could offer strength, wisdom, or protection. The bear, for instance, symbolized courage and healing. The eagle, vision and connection to the Creator. The wolf, loyalty and community. Totem poles carved by Northwest Coast tribes told stories of family lineage, spiritual guardians, and important events, intertwining art, history, and faith in towering wooden monuments. Sacred plants like sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and tobacco were more than herbs. They were gifts from the earth, tools for purification and prayer. Burning these plants in a ritual called smudging would cleanse people and places of negative energy, inviting harmony and blessings. The rising smoke was thought to carry prayers skyward. This gentle act, repeated over generations, remains a powerful symbol of spiritual connection today. The complexity and depth of Native American spirituality reveal a world where every element, from stone to star, breathes with sacred energy. It is a worldview that teaches patience, humility, and reverence, an invitation to slow down and listen deeply to the earth and one another. Imagine now the end of a long day, soft twilight casting shadows over the hills, a gentle breeze rustling leaves, and the faint sound of drums echoing in the distance. Around a fire, elders tell stories of creation, of heroes and animals, of stars and spirits. Their voices rise and fall like the night wind, weaving the old tales into the present moment. Children, eyes heavy with sleep, sit close and feel the warmth of the flames. The air is thick with the scent of cedar and pine. In this sacred space, the boundary between past and present blurs. The stories are alive, the spirits near. The land itself seems to breathe with calm and timelessness. And as your own breath slows and deepens, you, too, become part of this great circle, a circle without beginning or end. Let your body rest in the rhythm of the drum. Let your mind drift in the melody of the song. Let your spirit be carried gently, like a feather on the wind, into a place of peace and belonging. Sleep now, embraced by the wisdom of the earth, the watchful stars, and the sacred songs sung beneath them. At first glance, the daily life of Native American peoples might seem simple to the outside eye. A cycle of hunting, gathering, planting, and storytelling. But beneath this surface lay rich and complex social systems that balanced individual needs with community well-being, creating networks of care, responsibility, and belonging. Each tribe had its own unique ways of organizing life, yet many shared an understanding that no one lived truly alone. The tribe, the clan, the family, they were lifelines woven into the fabric of existence. In many Native cultures, social roles were clearly defined but flexible. Men and women often had distinct responsibilities, though these varied widely from tribe to tribe. For instance, among the Iroquois, women held considerable power, controlling land, selecting leaders, and managing the planting of crops. In contrast, plains tribes like the Lakota emphasized hunting and warrior roles for men, while women cared for the home and children, prepared food, and made clothing. Yet even in such systems, cooperation and mutual respect were paramount. The roles complemented one another like the sun and the moon. Daily life was governed by the seasons and the gifts the land provided. Spring was a time for planting corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters, whose intertwined growth mirrored the interconnectedness of the community itself. Summer brought tending the fields and gathering wild fruits. Fall was harvest, preparation, and celebration. Winter, though harsh, was a time of storytelling, crafts, and planning. Fires burned bright inside lodges and longhouses, while outside, the snow muffled the world into a soft silence. Within the home, the rhythm of chores and tasks was both practical and spiritual. Pottery might be shaped with careful hands. Songs hummed softly. Children learned by watching and helping, absorbing skills through imitation and gentle correction. Elders, revered for their wisdom, held the history and laws of the people in their memories, teaching through stories and example. Many tribes lived in extended family units or clans, groups linked by blood or marriage. Clans often had totems, animals or natural forces that symbolized their identity and values. For example, the Cherokee clans included the wolf, deer, bird, and paint clans, each with specific roles and responsibilities in the community. Clan membership shaped social interactions, marriage rules, and ceremonies, creating a sense of belonging that stretched beyond the immediate household. Leadership was usually earned, not inherited. Chiefs and councils guided the tribe, but their authority rested on consensus and respect rather than command. Among the Navajo, for instance, leaders were chosen for their wisdom and ability to keep harmony. In some tribes, women held key political roles, such as the Haudenosaunee, Iroquois, clan mothers, who selected chiefs and ensured leaders acted in the community's best interests. The ideal leader was humble, generous, and always mindful of the people's needs. Trade was another vital aspect of social life, weaving distant tribes into networks of exchange. Shells from the Pacific coast traveled eastward. Obsidian from volcanic lands found its way to the plains, and colorful beads and copper artifacts moved along paths carved by generations. Trade was not merely economic. It was also a way to build alliances, share knowledge, and maintain peace. Meals were communal affairs, often shared outdoors or around the hearth. Food was never taken for granted. Every part of a hunted animal was used, from meat to bones to sinew. And plants were gathered with gratitude and care. Corn, wild rice, berries, nuts, and fish formed staples in different regions. Food preparation involved skillful techniques, smoking, drying, grinding, and baking, all passed down through oral tradition. Imagine a day in a plains village. Morning light warms the teepees as men prepare to hunt buffalo, their weapons sharp and their minds focused. Women tend children and cook, repairing clothing and crafting tools. Elders sit in the shade, weaving stories into the fabric of the day. The village hums with quiet purpose, each person playing a role in the web of life. In the forests of the Northeast, the rhythm might be different, but no less harmonious. The Iroquois longhouses stretch like great communal homes along the riverbanks. Families gather inside, sharing warmth and stories. Women oversee the gardens while men fish and hunt in the rich woodlands. Children learn the names of plants and animals, the songs of the seasons, and the wisdom of the elders. Daily life was also shaped by values like generosity, humility, and respect for others. In many tribes, sharing was a sacred duty. Food, tools, shelter, all were offered to those in need without expectation of repayment. This created a safety net woven from trust and mutual care, ensuring the survival and strength of the community. Pride was found not in possessions, but in generosity. As the sun dips toward the horizon, the village settles. Fires flicker, stories unfold, and songs rise into the night sky. The social fabric, woven from countless small moments and relationships, holds the people together. In this way, daily life and social structure were not separate from spiritual life. They were part of the same great circle. As you listen, let your mind drift into that circle. Feel the quiet strength of community, the soft murmur of shared stories, the gentle rhythm of days lived in balance. Let the peacefulness of this world carry you softly towards sleep, wrapped in the warmth of belonging and the steady pulse of life. As the rhythms of the day fade into evening, Native American communities often gathered in spaces designed to nurture connection and reflection. In the Great Basin and Plateau regions, families might assemble around small fires, sharing quiet conversation and preparing for rest. The sounds of children's laughter mingled with the crackle of flames and the whisper of night winds moving through the trees. Such moments were quiet, but deeply significant, a chance to renew bonds and share the invisible threads that held the community together. Storytelling was central to these evening gatherings. These stories were far more than entertainment. They were vessels of knowledge, morality, and identity. Elders recounted creation myths that traced the origins of the world and the people. Tales of trickster figures, like coyote or raven, were shared not just for amusement, but as lessons on human nature and the balance between order and chaos. Each story was a thread in the vast tapestry of cultural memory, passed down through generations with reverence and care. The social structures also extended beyond family and tribe into systems of kinship that defined rights, responsibilities, and relationships across vast distances. Among the Plains tribes, for example, kinship terms stretched far beyond the immediate family, encompassing extended relations who supported one another through cooperation in hunting, childcare, and defense. These bonds created a resilient network where the well-being of the group took precedence over individual desires. Children played an essential role in this social web. From a young age, they were taught the importance of respect for elders, for the earth, and for all living beings. Learning was experiential. Children observed adults carefully, helped with chores, and practiced skills under patient guidance. Play often mirrored adult roles, preparing children physically and emotionally for their future responsibilities. The transition from childhood to adulthood was marked by ceremonies that honored growth and readiness, reinforcing the community's collective values. Marriage customs further reflected the intricate social fabric. Many tribes practiced exogamy, marrying outside one's clan or band to strengthen alliances and foster wider community ties. These unions were celebrated with ceremonies filled with music, dance, and feasting, symbolizing not only the joining of two people, but also the merging of families and tribes. Marriage was less about personal romance and more about community cohesion, continuity, and mutual support. Within these social systems, respect for elders was a cornerstone. Elders were the living libraries of their people, keepers of language, history, law, and spiritual wisdom. Their counsel was sought in matters large and small, from resolving disputes to guiding important ceremonies. Elders were honored with ceremonies, cared for by younger generations, and given the space to teach through stories, songs, and example. This respect ensured that knowledge and traditions flowed seamlessly across time. Gender roles, while often distinct, also displayed fluidity in many tribes. Some individuals, recognized today as two-spirit people, embodied a blending or transcendence of traditional male and female roles. These respected individuals often held special social and spiritual positions, healers, mediators, or ceremonial leaders, reflecting the community's understanding of human diversity and the sacred balance of energies. Craftsmanship was another vital element of daily life and social structure. Skilled artisans created everything from intricate beadwork and quill work to pottery, weaving, and basketry. These objects were not mere decorations, but symbols of identity and status, often imbued with spiritual meaning. Women's work, such as weaving and pottery, was honored alongside men's contributions, like tool-making and carving. The exchange of crafted goods further strengthened social ties through trade and gift-giving. In many communities, music and dance were woven into social life, marking important events, seasons, and spiritual occasions. Dances could be lively celebrations or solemn rituals, involving entire communities moving together in patterns that symbolized cosmic cycles or tribal stories. Music was created from drums, rattles, flutes, and voices, each sound carrying layers of meaning and connection. Imagine now the quiet of a winter night in a forest village. Snow blankets the ground, muffling footsteps and softening the world. Inside a warm longhouse, the fire's glow dances on wooden beams. The air is filled with the scent of cedar and pine smoke. Families gather close, wrapped in blankets, sharing food and stories. Elders speak softly of ancestors and spirits. Children's eyes grow heavy with sleep as the steady beat of a drum drifts through the room. This peaceful scene embodies the delicate balance of Native American daily life and social structure, an enduring harmony of roles, relationships, and rhythms held together by respect, care, and shared purpose. It is a world where each individual finds a place, a voice, and a responsibility within the greater circle of life. As you listen, allow yourself to sink into this circle, feeling the warmth of community and the gentle strength of tradition. Let the calm flow through you like a quiet river, carrying you softly toward rest. Sleep now, wrapped in the embrace of ancient wisdom and the steady heartbeat of a people deeply connected to each other and the earth. The artistic expressions of Native American peoples were never merely decorative. They were living languages, sacred dialogues between the artist, the community, and the spirit world. In every carved totem, painted pottery, and woven basket lay a story, a connection to ancestors, the land, and the mysteries of life. These art forms reflected identity, belief, and history, passed carefully from generation to generation, often created with rituals and prayers that infused them with power. Each tribe developed unique styles and techniques shaped by their environment and cultural values. In the forests and plains, beadwork and quill work adorned clothing and accessories, transforming everyday items into symbols of status and spirituality. Plains tribes, like the Lakota and Crow, used porcupine quills dyed in bright colors to create intricate patterns on leather garments and bags, while eastern woodland peoples embroidered delicate floral designs with glass beads. These crafts required hours of patience and skill, and the resulting pieces were treasured heirlooms. Pottery was another vital art form, especially among southwestern tribes like the Hopi and Pueblo. Using clay from local earth, artisans shaped pots, bowls, and jars with meticulous care. The vessels were painted with natural pigments in geometric and symbolic designs, often representing water, fertility, animals, or cosmic forces. These pots were used in daily life, but also held spiritual significance, employed in ceremonies or as offerings to ensure harmony between people and nature. Textiles and weaving also held great importance. The Navajo, renowned for their weaving, created blankets and rugs that combined beauty and utility. Using wool from their sheep, they spun, dyed, and wove patterns that told stories of their landscape and beliefs. Each rug was a narrative woven with threads, symbols of mountains, rivers, and sacred animals. The process of weaving itself was often considered a spiritual act, connecting the weaver to the earth and the ancestors. Carving was another way native people shaped meaning out of wood, bone, stone, and shell. Totem poles, especially from the northwest coast tribes, such as the Haida and Tlingit, stood like towering family histories carved into giant cedar trees. These poles depicted animals, spirits, and important clan stories, communicating social status and cultural heritage. Masks carved from wood were used in ceremonies and dances, their fierce or serene faces bringing myths and spirits to life. Music and dance were inseparable from these arts. Drums, flutes, rattles, and whistles were crafted with care, each instrument producing sounds meant to carry prayers, summon spirits, or celebrate life. Songs told stories just as vividly as painted or carved images, weaving memory and emotion in melodies passed down through generations. Dances, often performed in elaborate regalia adorned with feathers, beads, and shells, marked important events and connected people to their spiritual heritage. Storytelling itself was a highly revered art form. Oral histories that shaped worldview, taught values, and entertained. From the crackling firelight, elders recited tales of creation, heroic deeds, trickster antics, and the lessons of animals and nature. These stories held layers of meaning, sometimes humorous, sometimes solemn, always rich with wisdom. They reinforced the tribe's identity, taught the young, and kept the past alive in the present. Imagine a peaceful evening in a village by a river. Families sit beneath the stars, children nestled close to elders, as a storyteller's voice rises and falls like the gentle ripple of water. The tale is about Coyote, the mischievous trickster who both disrupts and teaches through his escapades. As the story unfolds, listeners are drawn into a world where the boundaries between human and animal, earth and sky, are fluid and full of magic. The storyteller's words paint vivid pictures, the night air thick with the scent of pine and sage. In the same village, artisans work quietly inside their homes. A woman delicately threads beads onto a leather strap, her hands steady and practiced. Nearby, a man carves a wooden flute, smoothing its surface until it sings with the wind. Each creation is a meditation, a connection to ancestors, and a gift for future generations. These creative practices were not only beautiful, but deeply meaningful. They connected people to the cycles of life, the land's gifts, and the spirits that walked alongside them. The arts were ways to honor the sacred, preserve history, and express identity. As you listen to these stories of art and craft, let your mind wander gently through the quiet village. Feel the steady rhythm of hands at work, the soft murmur of stories told by firelight. Allow the peacefulness of this creative world to settle around you like a warm blanket. Let your breathing slow and deepen, carried by the calm flow of history and the soft pulse of human connection. Sleep now, cradled by the gentle hands of art and story, wrapped in the timeless beauty of a people who spoke to the world through color, song, and form. As the night deepens, the creative spirit of Native American peoples continues to shine through in countless forms, each one a thread woven into the vast tapestry of culture and memory. Beyond the tangible crafts, storytelling itself is a living art, a bridge that connects past to present, human to spirit, and individual to community. These stories, spoken softly beneath the stars or around a crackling fire, are the heartbeat of the people. In many tribes, stories held the power to teach, to heal, and to guide. The tales of animals, cunning foxes, wise owls, strong bears, were not just fables but lessons wrapped in metaphor. The trickster figure, often coyote or raven, played a vital role by challenging norms, exposing folly, and reminding listeners of life's complexities. These narratives encouraged reflection and humility, teaching that wisdom often arises from unexpected places. Storytelling was also a way to keep history alive without written words. Generations of elders memorized vast genealogies, laws, and events through oral tradition, passing them carefully to the young in song, chant, and narrative. This living archive ensured continuity and identity, even in the face of displacement and hardship. Stories became sacred trusts, carried in the heart as much as in the mind. Visual art, too, was deeply intertwined with these stories. Every painted motif on pottery or woven blanket, every carved totem or mask, told a tale or held a meaning known to those who listened with eyes and spirit. Symbols were chosen deliberately, often representing elements of nature or spiritual concepts. Circles for cycles of life, animals for traits or clans, colors for directions or emotions. These works functioned as both art and language, accessible to those who understood their symbolism. Consider the sacred regalia worn during dances and ceremonies. These garments were masterpieces of craftsmanship. Beaded shirts, feathered headdresses, painted faces, and intricate jewelry. Each piece was imbued with spiritual power, connecting the wearer to ancestors and the spirit world. Creating and wearing such regalia was a form of prayer, a way to carry and express identity, honor, and purpose. The dance itself was a story in motion, a living embodiment of history and belief. Music, too, was a vital thread. Drums beat with the heartbeat of the earth. Flutes sang melodies that mimicked bird calls or the wind, and rattles and bells added texture to ceremonies and celebrations. Music carried prayers upward and brought the community together in shared experience. Songs might tell of the seasons, of battles fought, or of love and loss. The repetition of melodies and rhythms created a trance-like state, connecting dancers and listeners with deeper spiritual realms. Craftsmanship extended beyond aesthetics. It was survival and identity intertwined. Tools carved with care made hunting and daily work possible. Baskets woven tight held the fruits of the earth. Painted pottery preserved water and food, its designs connecting utility with beauty. Every object carried the imprint of its maker's skill and intention, a legacy of care and connection. Imagine again a quiet night in a village where the fire's glow softens the world. An elder's voice rises, telling the story of the first stars, how they came to hang in the sky, guiding hunters and dreamers. Nearby, a young woman finishes a beaded necklace, the tiny glass beads shimmering like the stars above. A drummer taps softly, sending gentle rhythms into the night air. This harmony of art, story, and music is a reflection of a worldview that honors the interconnectedness of all things. For Native peoples, creativity was a sacred act, a way to communicate across time and space, to celebrate life's beauty, and to sustain the spirit. Through these expressions, they remained deeply rooted in their land and culture, even as the world around them changed. As you listen, allow yourself to be carried by the gentle flow of stories and songs. Feel the delicate touch of the artist's hands, the warmth of shared tales by firelight, the soothing pulse of the drum. Let these ancient rhythms lull your mind and body toward peaceful rest. Sleep now, cradled by the enduring art and stories of a people whose voices continue to sing softly through time, whispering wisdom, beauty, and peace. As we come toward the final chapters of this journey through the beautiful life of Native American peoples before the great disruptions of history, it's important to pause and reflect on the enduring legacy they have left behind. Though their societies were forever changed by the arrival of Europeans and the tragic events that followed, the spirit, wisdom, and resilience of Native Americans continue to live on in countless ways, woven into the land, culture, and memory of this continent. One remarkable fact is how deeply Native Americans shaped the very land itself. Long before cities and modern farms, the indigenous peoples carefully tended forests, grasslands, and waterways, using fire and sustainable harvesting to nurture biodiversity. Their stewardship was not about domination, but about living in harmony with nature's rhythms. For example, the use of controlled burns helped prevent larger wildfires and promoted the growth of useful plants, creating rich habitats for wildlife and humans alike. This ancient ecological wisdom is increasingly recognized today as vital to environmental conservation. The legacy of native languages is another profound testament to cultural endurance. Hundreds of distinct languages once flourished across North America, each with its own worldview embedded in its sounds, stories, and grammar. Though many languages were suppressed or lost due to colonization, efforts to revitalize and preserve them continue with passion and success. Language carries more than words. It carries identity, history, and a unique way of understanding the world. Native art and craftsmanship remain powerful symbols of identity and pride. Contemporary Native artists draw on centuries-old traditions while also exploring new forms and themes, bridging past and present. From exquisite beadwork to contemporary paintings, pottery, and sculpture, these creations honor ancestors and speak to ongoing struggles and hopes. They remind us that culture is not frozen in time, but a living, evolving force. Spiritual traditions, too, persist, sometimes practiced openly and sometimes quietly protected. Ceremonies that honor the seasons, the earth and the spirits of ancestors continue to provide meaning and connection. Many native communities emphasize the sacredness of water, the land, and all living beings, values that resonate deeply in today's conversations about environmental stewardship and respect for life. In reflecting on this legacy, it's important to acknowledge the resilience and strength that have allowed native cultures to survive and thrive despite centuries of hardship. Stories of survival are woven throughout history, families and communities maintaining traditions, languages, and ceremonies even under harsh policies aimed at erasing them. This resilience is a quiet but powerful testament to the unbreakable spirit of a people deeply connected to their land and each other. Imagine walking through a forest once tended by native hands, feeling the rich soil beneath your feet, breathing in the clean air shaped by centuries of stewardship. Imagine hearing a song in a language that carries the wisdom of your ancestors, or seeing a piece of art that tells a story older than any book. These experiences connect us to a legacy that stretches back thousands of years and forward into the future. As you listen to this reflection, allow your thoughts to slow and deepen. Feel the vastness of time and the gentle presence of those who came before, still here in the wind, the earth, and the water. Let this awareness wrap around you like a soft blanket, comforting and steady. Sleep now, carried by the enduring legacy of a people whose love for their land and each other continues to shine softly through time. Continuing our quiet reflection on the lasting legacy of Native American cultures, we find ourselves enveloped by a sense of reverence and profound respect. Their history, though marked by hardship and loss, is also a testament to an enduring spirit, a spirit that continues to inspire and teach us about resilience, connection, and harmony with the natural world. One of the most beautiful aspects of this legacy is the ongoing relationship between native peoples and their ancestral lands. Across the continent, tribes have fought to reclaim and protect sacred sites, forests, rivers, and mountains. These places are not just physical locations. They are living, breathing entities, sources of life, identity, and spirituality. The deep bond between people and place is a reminder of our shared responsibility to honor and care for the earth. In recent decades, many native communities have revitalized cultural practices that were once threatened. Powwows, ceremonies, language classes, and art programs have blossomed, creating spaces where tradition and innovation meet. Younger generations are learning old songs and dances, crafting traditional regalia, and speaking ancestral languages once again. This cultural renaissance is a powerful assertion of identity and hope. Moreover, native wisdom is increasingly influencing contemporary discussions on environmental stewardship, sustainability, and social justice. The holistic worldview, seeing all life as interconnected and deserving of respect, is a vital perspective in our global efforts to heal the planet. Practices such as controlled burns, water conservation, and community-based resource management draw directly from indigenous knowledge systems refined over millennia. The stories of Native American resilience extend beyond cultural preservation to political and social activism. Tribes assert sovereignty, fight for treaty rights, and work to ensure their voices are heard in government and society. These efforts are part of a broader movement to reclaim dignity and agency in the face of centuries of colonization. Imagine now a gentle dawn breaking over a quiet landscape once tended by native hands. The first light filters through ancient trees, touching wildflowers and rippling across clear streams. In this moment, the land breathes deeply, carrying the whispers of ancestors and the promise of tomorrow. It is a place where past and present merge, where history is not forgotten, but honored in every living thing. As you listen, let this peaceful vision settle in your heart. Feel the soft embrace of legacy, strong, enduring, and full of quiet power. Let your breath slow, your muscles relax, and your mind drift gently on this current of connection and hope. Sleep now, held by the gentle strength of a people whose stories, songs, and wisdom continue to light the way, guiding us all toward a future filled with respect, harmony, and peace.